Beyblade X is the most fun that Beyblade has ever been. Blanket statement that some of you may not agree with, but hear me out. So Beyblade's been around since 1999. This year marks the 25th anniversary. Beyblade X came out last year in Japan, launched this previous summer in North America, and most of the rest of the world. This is the fourth generation of Beyblade, the first being Bakuten Beyblade, or just known as Beyblade, or Plastic Gen Beyblade. The second generation was Metal Fight Beyblade. The third was Beyblade Burst. And the fourth, the current season, is Beyblade X. Now, why is Beyblade X the most fun that Beyblade has ever been? There's been a major shift in sort of toy lines and what's appealing to kids over the last probably 10 years, with toys being sort of shoved to the side for TikTok and Fortnite. There's been this step away from toys and sort of real life interaction and games for esports titles like Fortnite or Apex or CSGO or League of Legends, and there's nothing wrong with any of those games. However, especially during lockdown, a lot of people just stopped socializing and spent a lot of their time playing video games, myself included. I really like competitive video games. I'm a sucker for things like Fortnite and Apex, and I've spent probably way too much time playing these games. However, during lockdown, I felt like I was spending way too much time sitting in front of a screen or raging at my computer, and I wanted to sort of step away from that and spend time doing something that was like tangible and visceral. I was scrolling through TikTok one day and saw a guy doing a live stream with Beyblade battles. I was like, Beyblade, I love Beyblade. I grew up with it. I've been interested in it off and on throughout my entire life. It really stuck with me as a child and into adulthood. And every generation I sort of dabble in it. And I started this channel 2 years ago with the intention of just talking about things that I liked from my childhood and making sort of some history videos on things that I remember from that time period. And then Beyblade X launched, and Beyblade X does something that none of the other generations did, and it made the game fun to watch. So historically, competitive Beyblade has sort of devolved into stamina battles, which are not very interesting to watch, not particularly interesting to play, and don't require a vast amount of skill other than part knowledge. You just kind of launch it, and whoever's got the better bearing or the better combo generally wins. However, Beyblade X sort of switches things up by adding these gear rails and this sort of asymmetrical stadium. It's no longer a perfectly round dish, and battles have become a lot more complex in the case of positioning because of the asymmetrical design of the stadium, and the rails offer some really interesting, intense, visceral battles. Now, the system is basic enough that most people can pick it up and understand how it works, and complex enough that you can delve into different parts and customization in order to build more optimal combos. Most tournaments are played with decks of 3 combos, and like I said, the game isn't super complex, and the barrier to entry isn't that high. You can go to Walmart or Target or Amazon and you can buy pretty much everything you need without any sort of accessibility issue other than new waves potentially not being out in your area. Unlike other competitive hobbies like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon or Magic, the barrier to entry is a lot lower for Beyblade. It doesn't require you opening packs of cards or buying singles off of a website for an obscene amount of money with a deck that ultimately costs you between $500 and $1,000 to play at a competitive level. Beyblade, you can just go to Target and get most of the meta parts. Obviously, Japan is a little bit further ahead, but even those you can import for a fairly reasonable price. And if you want to take it even a step further and sort of learn the competitive aspect of Beyblade, you can watch a couple guide videos or combo videos and get a pretty fundamental understanding of the game and the complexities of it in a pretty short period of time. unlike Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic or Pokemon, where you have to invest a lot of time in order to understand the game, especially as a new player. The barrier to entry is very high, and it's not super interesting to watch if you don't have card knowledge. If you're watching a game and you have no idea what's happening because you have no idea what the cards do, then obviously one person's going to win and one person's going to lose, but you're going to have no idea how they got to that point. On the flip side of that, you've got Beyblade, which in its nature is a fairly simplistic game. There's a couple different win conditions. You can outspin your opponent, you can KO your opponent into the pocket, you can KO them out the extreme zone, or you can burst them. Most tournaments play to first to 4 points or first to 7 points, with the different win conditions offering different point values. And once you have that sort of basic understanding, then you can watch it and understand who's ahead and who's not ahead and who won and how they won, and it's pretty basic. At a base level, looking in, if you've never played Beyblade, it might feel a little too basic, but like I said, complexity does arise once you delve deeper into it, especially when it comes to combo building and deck building and different launch strategies, with positioning being a pretty important thing for Beyblade X at this point. But even without those things, just watching it, you can understand what's going on without having to rely on something like card knowledge. That's why I think Beyblade X is one of the most interesting generations that Takara Tomy has ever come up with, and certainly one of the most interesting to watch or to play. If you've never played it, I definitely would recommend taking a look at it. If you're interested in sort of competitive hobbies or competitive video games, it's sort of like the toy version of an esport almost. It feels like Takara Tomy is really pushing the competitive aspect. Obviously, competitive has always been super popular in Japan, but they seem to be pushing sort of that narrative out into the rest of the world as well, with Wizards of the Coast potentially handling the competitive aspect of Beyblade X outside of Japan, which is huge for the hobby, because as long as tournaments are easily accessible, then people are going to be more drawn to it. As of right now, the fan community has been hosting fan tournaments all over the world, with the biggest network of bladers coming through the World Beyblade Organization, which has been around for well over a decade at this point. So if it looks interesting to you, I definitely recommend checking it out. There's a ton of content creators, including myself, that primarily make Beyblade X content. And if you grew up with it, there's a good chance that you'll end up liking it. Like I said, barrier to entry is pretty low, with most of the products being fairly cheap. Like I said, they're in the toy section of most Targets and Walmarts. So if you grew up in a time period where Beyblade was accessible, but you never got into it, I'd be interested if maybe this one looks a little more interesting to you. Anyway, I'm interested to know everybody's thoughts down below. Hit the like for the algorithm, subscribe if you haven't already for future Beyblade content, and I will see you guys in the next one.